everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sleep Paralysis News. This is the place where we speak openly about that space, that liminal space that we all enter when we sleep, such a natural thing. Today, I've got an amazing guest, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all about her and her experiences and her story and what she does. She works in the space of sleep paralysis and dreams, and she's also an experiencer. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Great. So let's start. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Very short, very long story, very short. While working in corporate, I was in corporate consulting in real estate, which is about as tight-laced as they come in terms of industries, for a little over 20 years, while also building my shamanic practice. So I went to shaman school and started studying this in my early 20s. And I'm the owner now of Totem Readings. It's 15 years old. I've been doing it full time for the last 5. And as a working shaman, I create decks, self-publish things that assist people with stimulating their intuition. But one of the core things we do is what's called a shamanic journeying meditation, which stimulates a theta wave state in the brain. It's a bit like a waking lucid dream. So a lot of things come up in this work around what are regular dreams, what are waking dreams, neural pathway development, theta wave states in the brain, and then also what are just dreams, your subconscious taking out the trash, if you will, or taking inventory. And then what are the quote big dreams that in my experience and a lot of my clients' experiences are not really dreams at all. And that whatever that real thing is, that real place we go to seems to be sharpening in intensity and high definition in the last year. I'm not the only one experiencing that. So it's been interesting. And then any psychic, anyone listening to this, watching this, it's okay if you don't believe. None of us really care. We're not evangelizing or trying to close a deal ever. We're not those people. We're too busy doing our shit. Oh, pardon my French. Sorry. I'll try and keep clean language for the rest of this. But sleep paralysis was a thing from early childhood. And a lot of my friends that are mediums in particular, which is a certain subset of psychics that talk to, generally speaking, dead people, deceased loved ones on the other side, all had horrible night terrors, sleep paralysis all throughout childhood, and usually some amount of like medical grade insomnia. You guys, I'm sure know, people say, oh, I'm an insomniac. I've gone 3-4 days without sleep. That's insomnia. I've done that, in Europe, being off cycle from here, despite taking sleeping pills. So, this sleep thing has been a lifelong journey along with the spiritual growth piece. And I don't think they're not connected, actually.
I just want to pick up on, you said that it's something is sharpening
Yeah.
is it the episodes of sleep paralysis, or is it more than that?
No, it has, at least for me and several of my clients and collaborators, I don't get sleep paralysis anymore. I get a very distinct sense of what some people I think would call astral travel, where it's way more than a lucid dream. It's more high definition now than waking reality. And we like go places. And this has been something I've been writing about on Substack, where I've taken to putting the word dream in, sarcastic quotes. So for whatever reason, I've sort of transcended, at least for the moment, the sleep paralysis night terror piece, and have moved it, or maybe my neural pathways have moved it into this conscious, interesting space, which is, by the way, largely precognitive, like the Iran-Israel thing. I dreamt about this whole conversation I had with all people. And by the way, he's no great hero to me, one way or the other, Donald Trump, on the astral, like 3 weeks before all of that started. So I think increasingly when we have those, what I call big dreams, right? I think we go to what the Aborigines referred to as reality, and they consider this world to be dream time. And I don't know if it's becoming more available, if it's from, 20 plus years of doing shamanic journey meditations, going into a theta wave state every day. Who knows what that does to your neural pathways? And it's been really interesting. Yeah.
Can you tell us, because you said that you used to have sleep paralysis and it's kind
Yes.
of transformed now or moved into kind of more
Yeah.
astral projection and out of body stuff. So when you had sleep paralysis, what was that like?
Terrifying. And
What?
to anyone who hasn't had it, I don't think it's sort of like a panic attack. You know, when you hear people talk about it, if you've ever had one, you feel like you're dying, right? Like it's not this cute little, like, oh, I had a bout of anxiety. Physiologically, somatically, you're in full panic. And to me, the sleep paralysis was largely terrifying. And the feeling of being very vulnerable and not being able to do anything about it, I think is a universal. There's a visceral terror that comes with that. And also, you know, all the classics of not being able to scream, not just not move, but not be able to scream, trying to scream and just barely a sound coming out. And a sense, at least for me, and this might sound very woo to your listeners, but a sense of things being around. And I'm not strictly speaking like a UFO person. I actually had my first UAP sighting experience, and it was fairly nominal 2 years ago. Haven't had one since. But I remember not being able to, as a child, watch movies about UFOs and things like that because of my experience in sleep paralysis. Something about it seemed to trigger that fear again. So that's a genre I've largely stayed away from in terms of watching movies. And I can watch like demon movies and things that are really scary, but the stuff about you in bed at night and where you might go off to or who might be around or what might be around is always hit my brainstem, shall we say. Yeah.
And for you, did you see anything? Did anything touch you? Did you
It
have any?
depends. I would say the majority of them was just sleep paralysis, not in control of my body, couldn't scream, couldn't make a noise until I could. But the other 20% correlated to what I would call like negative spiritual experiences, which for me, you know, I use language just as a rough order of magnitude. Like, you know, you could say negative entity, demon, alien, whatever. I don't care. Like to me, the words are, because I don't think we really know a lot, right? I think people who think they know a lot don't. The more I learn, the less I know. So just, you know, but a sense of there being something, and I wouldn't see things, but I would often hear things. And in our psychic parlance, that's called clairaudience, clear hearing, sort of like clairvoyance is clear seeing. And anyone who has clairaudience can tell you it's the creepiest psychic ability. You know, hearing whispers at night is pretty tough. I'd rather see something odd, frankly, because we're so sight dominant that there's something very intimate about that, like inner ear whisper. And it wasn't always nasty, it just felt unnatural and unwelcome, frankly. And one time in particular, I was in literally like shaman school, was taking a 3-part, you know, quite expensive course. And I was somewhere in the middle of it. So not in the beginning, not at the end. And I came home to sleep and I was living in the West Loop of Chicago in an old loft building. Then it used to be an old like sweatshop back in the day. So nice high ceilings, you know, one of the benefits of it being a place where there was child labor back in the early aughts. But I was going to bed and I felt a little uncomfortable and I had the sleep paralysis completely settle in, managed to get out of it, started to be able to make, you know, some verbalizations. And I said, you know, I remembered what my teacher in shaman school said. And I said, listen, you're not welcome here. I need to sleep. And I heard a whisper from the corner of the room and it was, you heard what she said. Shh. And that was the creepiest one of them all. It wasn't threatening at all, but it was like they were communicating with each other. And of course, all the lights went on. I was up all night. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard something similar to that before. You know.
Yeah. Where they were asking the others to like be polite, but it was so human. And the way they were modulating their voice was it was creepy because it was real. It was like how people would talk, kind of a thing. And you know, I've also just in the last week, you guys are going to get busy, I think, by the way. In the last week, a lot of my clients and I have shared this meta trend of having a lot of interesting experiences falling asleep and then waking. So that liminal state, those bookends on either side of being asleep. And how do I put this? My husband too, who I mentioned you has night terrors and sleep paralysis. Not regularly, but when he has them in clusters, right? So like a whole week will go by, and it's apropos of nothing. He's actually very relaxed, I was checking in. He's like, yeah, it just shows up when it shows up. He and I both been waking up at 3 a.m., wide awake, feeling like someone or something is around. And he's a chef. He does not do any of this. He's not into this. It's not that he's doesn't believe or he hates it, but he's hyper neutral to it. And so to realize this morning at breakfast, he and I were having a cup of coffee that we were both, because we knew we were up, but I didn't know he was getting that feeling as well, to the point where, like, he's older than me, he's in his 50s, like lets our large dog in the room, like opens the doors, like, get in here, just have another like living thing around as a little perimeter alarm or something. And it doesn't feel menacing, it just feels like, oh, like someone's around. There's
Yeah,
a feeling of it also having an intelligence to it, where there's purpose to whatever I'm not aware of what that is either. And partially or mainly because I don't care to ask. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, you know what? You guys do you. I'm gonna take some magnesium and try and get back to bed. And I'll fall asleep like this now after that, which is also weird. To go from a state of sort of hypervigilance to like, it's fine. Just the feeling of like the air being let out of the tires. You're like, oh, it's cool to go back to sleep now. Yeah.
yeah. What you seem to be saying is that it's not just a sleep phenomena. So it's not just something that's there when you sleep. You're
I,
wide
d-
awake and something
yeah.
is, you can feel as though something is around you whilst you're wide.
Specifically the last week. So the timing of this, because I reached out to you before this started.
Yeah,
The timing's very interesting to me. It feels like there's a culmination of a lot of things we would consider to be supernatural or psychic, but I think it's just because we don't have a firm understanding of them, actually. But yeah, it's been weird, and a lot of clients have been having it. A lot of clients have also, and me as well, only in about the last few months, I've had the feeling of what we would call in shamanism like a psychic surgery around 3, 4 a.m., but it doesn't hurt. And I'm not scared and it's not unpleasant. But I felt like the other night, like tools in my skull. And I was like, oh, good, they're helping me. And I woke up and I was like, oh, I can focus today. I was like, what the hell's going on? And just sort of like among the weird things, trust me, that's like almost a footnote now. But a lot of clients have had flashes of specific grids of light when they close their eyes or they're asleep. So oranges, reds, blues, but almost like on a grid. It's very interesting how consistent it is as a meta trend across people, that I work with that are all over the world. They kind of on paper have nothing in common. Some of them are psychic or intuitive, some of them are not. And so for this to emerge in about the last week and a half is fascinating to me.
Ooh, yeah, boy, that's
Yeah, it's weird, isn't
yeah.
it? I can send you guys so much weird stuff all the time. I'll be a
Oh,
funnel of
some of
weird
this
to
is
you.
similar to my stories, and me
Yeah.
and Sheila both have heard so many testimonies. I'm probably way over 100 of listening to testimonies, so nothing's really, so far fetched. I want to stay on sleep paralysis, but you
Yeah.
mentioned that you would had dreams of the Iran Iraq thing. I used to have premonitions when I was younger. I don't
Yeah.
anymore. How do you know when to act on something? How do you know that dream is real or it's just a dream? How do I if someone has a
Yeah.
premonition, how do they know to go tell Johnny, don't go get in that car? Because should I just act on everything? And that's the problem. We wait and see. And it's like, oh, I was right about that. So how do you know what to act
Yeah.
upon?
Well, like the dream I had about Iran, I was talking to Trump in the dream, which is hilarious. Side note, like places you don't think you'll go in your dreams. And I said, they want you to go to war with Iran. And if you don't, they're going to try and kill you. I have no idea who they are either. And I woke up, I was like, oh, that was weird. And then nothing happened. Then the news cycle started. I was like, oh, look at that. So for me, this is going to sound kind of like a cop out. And I suppose behaviorally it is. I don't really engage my prophetic dreams from an action perspective. I sort of observe. So the other night I had one, I've been working with a spirit guide, and I saw this huge great heron fly out of a tree trunk, like a stump of a tree, against this cloudy sky. And I came to waking. So again, that liminal state, like right after dreaming, but still not moving. So maybe not full sleep paralysis, but some other brainwave state. And this male voice said, today's going to be the day of the catastrophe, but you're going to be fine. Many hours later in the evening, a tree, there were floods here in Central Texas. That's where I live now. A tree fell on our house. And I realized, like, oh, the great blue heron flying up out of this tree trunk, what was left of it was a tree trunk. And I was like, how interesting. And, you know, it hit our garage roof, but really everything's fine. It smashed the neighbors' cars. Their cars were totaled, the other half of it. So it was quite violent, actually. So, I mean, you can act on it or not. What I would recommend doing is don't assume all the language of the dream is going to be literal. So if you have a dream about somebody or something and it's like, don't get in the car, just call and be like, hey, man, just do me a favor for the next few days. Just be careful. Like if you're driving, if you're flying, whatever it is, just double check things. Actually, my brother is an Army Ranger, my younger brother. And he had a dream, and he knew it wasn't like a dream the night before. As a Ranger, you do these parachute tests. You jump out of planes at kind of low altitude, and they're very dangerous. People die in training all the time. And in the dream, he couldn't get his parachutes open on the first tab. And then there's a secondary backup tab. And he did it and it worked. And my dead grandmother was there and said, you have to make sure you know where your secondary tab is and how it works and ask everybody before you get up in that plane today. And he did. The first tab didn't work. And so he called me. Of course, he's like, you know about this shit. I was like, yeah, his grandma or whatever, your subconscious mind, collective ancestral memory. Who the hell knows what the mechanism is? But it works for sure. And I think those precognitive dreams are like the other side of the coin from the sleep paralysis stuff that feels negative. I don't think you get one without the other, but I have no proof or evidence of that. I think it'd be interesting if do you guys have thoughts on that?
I know
It's almost like the intensity goes up both ways.
I have precognitive dreams,
Yeah.
you know, all the time, and I'm quite known for them actually. And I guess I'm like you, they play out. I also understand that with them, there's a level of intensity. This is also answering your question, Cyrus. There's a level of intensity and clarity with those dreams that separate them from others. So you wake up clearly remembering the sequence of events, who was there, even small little details, you'll remember them from that dream that you've had. And you wake up and you're quite clear about what happened, as if it was something you literally lived through.
Mhm.
I know that for me, as I said, I know that with it depends on who's in them, but there's a responsibility on my side to share it with that person, you know.
Yeah.
So
I did not share my dream with Trump.
you didn't, but
Sorry, I did not. Because what am I? That's above my pay grade a little bit. Is kind of where I go with those, you
I
know?
wonder, I wonder what would have happened if you did. That's quite interesting.
I probably would have gotten a visit from Homeland Security being like, what's this dream you had about people trying to kill the president in war? I'd be like, I probably didn't think this one all the way through.
But can
Um,
I also say that there's also something about sleep paralysis and psychic abilities broadly. I call them more sensitivities. There's a knowing that comes with it. There's an understanding of things. There's a sensing of things. I know people that can touch a photograph, for example, and in an instant know who painted the painting, can feel the
Yeah.
emotions of the painter, etc. They'll know when persons are about to pass away. They can
Yeah.
feel souls leave their bodies. You know, they have these extra sensitivities, I call them, along with the sleep paralysis. That it's
Can I
very
share a
common.
very weird recent dream that came with some sleep paralysis with you guys? Because there was a waking. Actually, I have the book right here. Here, bear with me. I know we're on screen. Sorry. I have this here just to make sure that I don't convince myself that I've gone completely insane. Just, you know, like I have to check this still a couple times a day. So I'm working with a spirit guide, Prometheus. No one's more shocked than me. I'm Native American. I'm a shaman. So you get what you get in the grab bag of spirit guides. It's the way I don't make the rules. I just play by them. And I had one of these hyper vivid, like more vivid than reality dreams, where I was going up a staircase with him. We got to the top penthouse. I don't know if it was a hotel or apartment building or whatever. And there was a fresco on the wall, but there were cutouts in the most intensely blue sky on the other side of it. And there was a bit of like, you know, the green paint. I don't know if they do this in the UK, but they use it to paint over things at park districts or, you know, public areas. So it's this Kelly green kind of, maybe it's the cheapest paint you can buy. I have no idea. But that was in the corner. And I turned to him and he said, we've been coming here and we've been removing the paint that was painted over this fresco. And, you know, bit by bit, we're bringing it back to life. And it was these figures of all these like gods. And I have no idea who they were because it wasn't that kind of a moment. And I said, well, how long? He goes, we've been doing this since before you even have thought in the universe. And I was like, well, that's an interesting detail. And I woke up, I was like, the dream about the blue ceiling, blue ceiling, blue ceiling. I'm not going to bore you with why I got this book. It ties into Prometheus. I found pages of this book out on a walk on a day when I was having this whole like tripping dead sober, frankly. And I've done psychedelics. This was the most psychedelic thing, nothing in my body. And I opened this book that day because I got this thing when I woke up and it was like, you have to open the book again. And it says, wait, where did it go? You're gonna die. Let this blue ceiling above us with all the stars be present at this acceptance. I opened this page up and that was the first sentence I saw. And I was like, okay, that's creepy. I think I went for a walk. I listened to a comedy podcast. There are some where you're like, whoa, they give you the heebie-jeebies, but there's this communication that's happening now for me and people I know that have noticed this shift of like, we're getting these little like scavenger hunt clues or ephemera in waking life that confirms that that dream was not just a dream, or maybe our brains are doing something incredible. You know, I don't know what the mechanism is. I don't know if spirit guides are physically real in the sense that like shamans, we talk about them or not. I don't know how you could know that. You know, hopefully we figure it out before I pass in this lifetime, but that's a tall order. Yeah.
So from a shamanistic perspective, how is this rationalized or made sense of?
Well, we go irrational. So shamanism is a little bit more literal and mystical. So for through the shamanic lens, that was Prometheus talking to me. That message is very important, whatever I was doing up there. And I knew in the dream, I was like, I've come here over and over again. Like that sense of familiarity, even though it was brand new. It was like deja vu in a dream. I don't know what you
Yeah.
call that. Double deja vu. And so right now, my task, should I choose to accept it, is to research everything I can about Prometheus. So I spent the last week reading through all the ancient plays written by, you know, like people who invented the tragedy or the satire, you know, names like Beyonce, except they're Greek and they're much harder to pronounce. And reading plays like his own language, supposedly his dialogue, trying to research what this could possibly mean, not just for me, but for where we are as a collective, because his energy in particular as a spirit guide feels much more about what I'm supposed to be doing in terms of action than other spirit guides, which were much more about my internal personal development, if that makes sense at all. And so shamans, we would tell, you know, if I was my client, I'd say time to do a meditation. And the shamanic journey meditations get you into a theta wave state because of the drumming music you listen to. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it acts like a metronome. So it is a form of self-hypnosis, right? You're not affirming anything or saying like affirming statements or trying to manifest anything or quit smoking, right? You're just going on a little lucid dream while you're sort of awake to communicate with your subconscious mind, get both hemispheres of the brain talking in real time to try and get some insights. So we treat spirit guides like they're literal and they're real. And, you know, when people go, well, does it matter if I do or not? I go, no, it works because it works, you know. And it's funny because there's this great metaphor of people often ask me how the clock works. I don't know. I didn't put the clock together, but I can tell you what time it is. Right. Yeah. So trying to focus on where I can be pragmatically useful.
Just to bring it back to sleep paralysis, how is
Yeah.
that from a shamanistic point of view? What is sleep paralysis? What is happening?
There's so many theories.
Who are the entities?
Yeah. So the Hopi and the Navajo, in terms of Native American shamanism, probably talked and continue to talk the most about this. And if you're familiar at all, they're in the area, as are the Utes, i.e. Utah, that Skinwalker Ranches. Are you guys familiar with Skinwalker Ranch? Yeah, so these stories have a lot to do with extraterrestrial or ultra terrestrial entities coming and tinkering around, all the stuff that you hear in modern UFO abductee and experiencer lore, frankly speaking. And they have different names for these entities, the ant people, which I always thought was an interesting one, because if you look at a drawing or an image of a tall or short gray, they look rather ant-like, don't they? And so to them, overwhelmingly, I will say it's considered a negative experience. And it's one of the primary reasons that you see dream catchers around where Native Americans sleep, demon catchers if you practice voodoo or any of its offshoots, and also why there's such a focus on securing spirit guides. When you're asleep and you're vulnerable and your little biocomputer's shut off for the evening, you want the big guns kind of looking out for you, is sort of the basic ecosystem of how that all works. The Aborigines have, I think, the most sophisticated system of belief around sleep paralysis, dreams, and waking reality. And it's their belief that dreams are real, that place you go to in the big dreams, the astral travel, whatever you want to call it, is the most real thing. That this waking consciousness is dream time. That, it's very like the Matrix, right? Or very Gnostic, where this is a simulation to them. And so the sleep paralysis, they think, is, whatever little nasties that are kind of running the illusion coming along to reset you. Or have you ever seen the movie Dark City?
No, I've not seen it.
Oh, you must watch it. It's sort of an Aboriginal sleep paralysis tale. Kiefer Sutherland's in it, Jennifer Connelly, William Hurt, and effectively the whole movie is about this city where it's always night and people fall asleep spontaneously. They get moved around by aliens, by these entities, and they have new memories implanted in them, and they begin new lives, except one man, a psychic, starts to remember his other lives and starts to kind of pull the thread on these things and realizes, spoiler alert, this movie is, I think, from the late 90s. So hopefully no one gets mad at me. Don't listen past this if you want to watch it. That it's not a city and it's not always night. They're on another planet. They've all been abducted and they're a part of a giant experiment. So, and he frees them all, which is very Promethean, by the way, to free people of their illusions. I know. I always get 0% chill spirit guides. It's never
And
just like a rabbit or a bird,
and what about your specific perspective on sleep paralysis? What do you think's happening?
I think it's a bit like Westworld. Have you seen the new Westworld show on HBO?
No.
Oh, you guys would really, it's very sophisticated. So the hosts, it's really the story from the Sumerian cuneiform of humans being created, except in the show, the humans are androids called hosts, but it's our creation story from those earlier like Sumerian cuneiform tablets. And the humans with the host will go stop all motor functions and the host shuts down. And then they have these verbal commands like, you will have a deep and dreamless sleep. You will not remember this. And some of them start to remember, right? Because of course, one of the scientists pushes out an update, a software update called the reveries, where they start to dream, which means they start to remember. And that does not go so well for the humans, scientists involved, as you can imagine. But it's an interesting premise of like, as they start to gain consciousness and remember their dreams or their past lives, it looks a lot like an alien abduction vignette because it's scientists in clean suits and lights and sterile rooms, and they're terrified until they figure some stuff out. So I think Westworld, for me, when I saw that, I was like, that's it. That's what goes on. And there's a Native American tribe in the theme park. So it's based around a theme park, and the hosts don't know they're hosts. They think they're humans. And the whole Native American tribe draws these images of the men in the clean suits, but it looks like, the old cave drawings or Bronze Age drawings from, early peoples talking about these other things that come here and that mess with their memories. So I thought that was fascinating. Also, they included in the show the concept of implants and targeted individuals. and like surgeries, having scars and no memory of what's happened to you. So it's, to me, that was what nailed it. I think there's probably a rather creepy explanation for it. And I think as humans, we have a survival instinct, a sense of something being around, and we're inculcated to dismiss that and it can't be real, etc. But I think it is. Now, that said, I don't know what we can do about it. I fight back a lot. I actually haven't had sleep paralysis at all, or any night terrors, for about 7 years. And I don't know if, because there's a multitude of variables there. There's no way to really know. But I think by shamanic journeying, doing that meditation in the theta wave state on a regular basis, my neural pathways, like I have more command of them when I'm scared now, perhaps. Or, I'm off doing other things in my dreams besides being aware of what's going on in my bedroom.
So tell me if I've understood this right. For you, we sleep, there's a whole another dimension that we can engage with. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
And I think that dimension engages with us more than we realize. I think it's very real. Yeah.
So everybody, when they sleep, they enter this other dimension that can engage with them, and vice versa.
I think so. And I don't know if you've seen recently, I forgot what it might have been MIT, but don't quote me on that. There was a study done on consciousness and how it is not housed physically in the brain. They don't actually know where consciousness comes from. And they see it more as maybe a broadcast that we as human biocomputers receive, right? So if that's the case, doors swing both ways. We receive a signal, maybe we also broadcast a signal. Maybe we can go that same direction as our consciousness and travel to other places non-corporeally.
Okay, and that would make sense in terms of the journeys and stuff that you've said you've been, wouldn't it? And the travels you've had.
And how odd the physical clues, like the synchronicities, as Carl Jung would call them, like that excerpt in that book, me landing on that page, that's one of 1,000 data points from the last couple of months of this interplay between wherever you go there and then a day or two later discovering this physical thing in material waking reality that's uncanny. I mean, it's hyper specific. Whatever the phenomenon is, as Jacques Vallée would call it. And he increasingly, I don't know if you're aware, believes that the UFO, UAP, abductee stuff is as psychic as it is physical. He actually sees it much more as a psychic phenomenon that requires human consciousness for it to exist in the first place. But I think it's they, whoever they are, I hope the good guys, seem to want us to believe that our dreams are not just dreams anymore. There seems to be like these contractions in this birthing process of getting closer together. And there's more specificity and tangible evidence, shamanic evidence, but still to all of this than I've ever noticed. It's fascinating.
And why do you think now, at this time, things are being ramped up?
I don't know. That, I know people have theories, they have scary theories, they have really hopeful theories. I don't know. Here's what I observe is that really high level spirit guides, what we would, pagans and others would consider to be gods or angels, are hyper active now with humans. And a lot of my work is I interface a lot with people that have newly had what they would call a spiritual awakening or realize they had one, like an experience, whatever it might be, a lot of which are very euphoric, spontaneous, sort of like meditative states. And they come out of it a day later and they're like, what was that? And I go, well, it's probably your endogenous DMT. You smoked your internal DMT. Congratulations. But it's growing and people are getting, the messages they're getting. So short answer, I don't know why. I think everything we're seeing geopolitically and like all of the cultural, social unrest is downstream of whatever this shift in consciousness seems to be. Yeah.
And also I'm thinking back to your dream where you saw the blue skies and stuff, and then the book and being led to the book and seeing the same thing in the book. And that's beyond synchronicity. That's
Yeah.
almost as though it was a deliberate act where you were shown something and you were called to see it in your waking
Yeah.
state. And that happened. But that would assume that there's something bigger than us, something
Yeah.
that can manipulate dream and wake states, and that
Yeah.
can interact with us and guide us
hmm
during the wake and dream state. Am I right? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, every ancient civilization and culture believed this. And so the more I experience these things, and that's one of, I'm writing a book about working with Prometheus as a spirit guide because I can't believe it. Like I have to write it just for my own sanity to be like, yeah, this all happened. But, you know, reading all this work, doing this work with clients, I've shifted my perspective. You know, we look back on, you know, Hellenistic paganism or these shamanic societies, the Vikings, the Aborigines, whatever it might be. And we see, oh, these silly primitive people who wrote all these things metaphorically to explain their reality, right? Like you worship the sun because it gives you crops, whatever. The older I get and the more of this work I do, I go, no, 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 they are the least silly people that have ever existed. And they wrote about and they talked about and they drew what they experienced. If you look at how they lived, they weren't precious. They were trying to, it's subsistence lifestyle for much of human history. Why would we assume that they're kings of metaphor? That's a bit odd. I think we might be the silliest people. This might be the silliest culture, and we've convinced ourselves that there's nothing beyond material reality. And I think it's a shared and purposeful delusion, actually. Yeah. So yeah, I'm getting more literal with all of this, which is hilarious, by the way, because I'm quite skeptical. And every time I'm like, really, guys, come on, can't it be a metaphor just for my
But
comfort?
it's really in your face, Rachel, and it seems to be really trying to
Yeah.
show you quite clearly that there's something more going on here, and that someone or something has this ability to
Yeah.
tweak it as they want, to make it happen as they want, you know. And so the word synchronicity just it's really mind-blowing because it's way
Yeah.
beyond, way beyond that, you know. But why do you think there is a reluctance to call it out, you know?
I think it makes you sound silly and low IQ. I think we have a lot of judgments about people that are interested in spiritual topics, in the topic of consciousness and astral travel and sleep paralysis and UAP phenomenon. I think that's changing. And I think that's really good for everybody because everyone I've ever talked to, even when I worked in corporate, everyone has a story, a sleep story, a sleep paralysis story, night terrors, a ghost. You know, everybody has one haunted house in their childhood. You know, you're on a business trip and everybody talks about it. But then if you were to say, well, this, that, and the other, and what do you think? And they're like, oh, well, you know, it's silly, silly. And you watch this thought terminating cliche set it like right there. And I don't know if you guys have studied cults at all, but the more I read and study about those, the more I go, oh my God, society's a Russian nesting doll of cults. We're not supposed to care about our dreams. We're not supposed to pay attention to synchronicities. We're not supposed to notice these trends or have these conversations. And so I'm intensely interested in that. And I view it as, you know, whatever breakthroughs you guys manage to land the plane on with regard to sleep paralysis and what you're looking at in this other place or other places, right? I think could be universally game changing for us as a species. I think there's something in, don't you think like you want to kind of scratch and sniff it? Maybe that's why you're doing this
Yeah.
podcast and the Substack. There's something else in there.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes,
Sarah.
yes, I agree. I want to share a slight story of, like I said, I had so many stories.
Yeah.
This person said that aliens visited him. He had cancer. The aliens visited him and removed the cancer. Now, this guy was, if you saw him, you probably wouldn't believe him. He wasn't very legitimate or anything like that. I've got other stories like that too. And so I'm wondering why some people see demons, why people see aliens. And then I think, you know, I don't really believe in aliens. So maybe that's why I had a demonic experience. And for the other
Yeah.
people, they don't believe in demons, so they had an alien experience. So
Yes.
I want
Jacques
to
Vallée
get
wrote
at,
about this.
yeah,
Um,
I want to get at where, like, is it a different entity just taking a form of something that you would believe so that you would interact with me, or is
yeah.
I can't explain this, but at the end, the question is, what do you want from me? Let's say demons and aliens are coming to us at sleep paralysis. Okay, what do you want from me? Like, give me the
Yeah.
message. What is it?
I think the message a lot of times. So Jacques Vallée wrote a really good book. I recommend you guys, your listeners, check it out. It's called Confrontations. It's just case studies of UAP phenomena, but a lot of it's with sleep paralysis. What you described as the psychic surgery or these medical procedures, some of which are good in their outcomes, some of which are not, and the arbitrariness seemingly of that. And Jacques has a couple theories. One is that they are using our own language, what we have available in our subconscious mind to communicate with us, right? So to your point, demons, aliens, and he even thinks the craft became more mechanical looking as we as humans entered a more mechanical age. So they're breadcrumbing us. And he thinks they're trying to teach us something, but it's not knowledge. It's not like learning a language. It's learning a temporal liminal ability in the brain. And the ones that are maybe more negative, there he has theories, and this is something survivors have talked about at length, that there are, medical experiments or things going on with breeding. Usually women seem to get the brunt of that, where they wake up and they're like, they feel like they had a medical procedure and they go to the doctor and they're like short a couple dozen eggs or something. And, shit gets wild. So Jacques Vallée, I would recommend looking. He doesn't write about sleep paralysis specifically, but he's such an open-minded, skeptical, logical, rational scientist who has just had his mind blown by studying this for the last 5 decades. And he's like, it's not physical entirely, but it is. So it's physical and it's ephemeral, and it needs a human mind, and it uses your mind and the language in it, symbolically, archetypally, and otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be quite normal, really. I think once you're in a place where you can accept that there's more than us here, there's
Yeah.
more human life, that other forms of life exist around us, that other dimensions exist around us, and that we can kind of interact in different dimensions. It's to be expected, I guess, isn't it?
I mean, it's
Yeah. And
2025 though. It's 2025. So we've been on this planet for thousands and thousands of years. And when I gauge that amount of time, our ability to understand what's going on with us is very limited. Like, we should know
it
more
used
about
to
sleep
not
paralysis.
be. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think,
and I think about that during the Egyptian times, and they
yeah.
seem to have a better understanding of spirituality. And here in our American culture, from our kids to how we're brought up, our creativity is suppressed. Our spirituality is
Yes.
suppressed in so many ways. So this is probably not the landscape to grow that understanding. So we were probably on a rise, an evolution spiritually, and then at some point, I think, I believe in conspiracies, they're getting too close to the truth. They're getting too
Yeah.
close to the truth, and some higher powers, hey, there's fluoride in our water, which is calcifies the pineal gland, the tap water, so that
Yep.
limits your spiritual connection right there, along with many other things. Someone could call me crazy for that, but there's a
The
force
purpose
out
of a
there.
system is what it does. So you're not crazy if you look at every data point and it all does something, like it calcifies the pineal gland. The purpose, that's just an engineering truism. And I would say there are negative forces, I believe, that want to suppress human imagination, spiritual growth. There always have been. To be a shaman in Russia or rural China or Tibet is scary, man. The government doesn't like you. They don't like shamans in most parts of the world. I'm very lucky to be here. But I will say they're not the only ones playing that game at that level. And I think the shift that you're talking about, yeah, it's up to us. We got to, follow these breadcrumbs, as Jacques Vallée says, and be open and explore and do our part. But I think it gets solved at the executive level. That seems to be the message that's coming through. And so hopefully, enough of the good guys that can manipulate reality can get in there and mix it up with the bad guys. And that's my little hopeful, I don't know, maybe that's my wish, but I get a lot of support from whatever they are, and they seem to want to show up for me when there's not so nice things around. Yesterday before, I woke up at 3 a.m. and so did my husband with that weird feeling, hearing noises that sound very purposeful, not nature noises or whatever outside. I saw all of these rune symbols. This guy had lined up these tree trunks he had just cut, because of the storm. I'm sure he had a tree fall, and they all had a rune on them that is called algiz, and it means protection. And I was like, oh, I'm protected. And so even at 3 a.m., I was like, oh, I saw those runes earlier. Somebody knew something weird there might be shenanigans. And so there's teams. I think some of them might be morally neutral. I think some of them might really care about us as a species, and others have wishes or desires that are antithetical to ours as a species. Yeah, I think a lot of it's more functional though than moral, you know?
I think one thing I do know though is that if more people speak about their experiences,
Yeah.
The more they can't be denied and pushed under the rug and called hallucinations, or you've got some kind of mental issue,
Yeah, or you're anxious. I got a lot of that when I had
Yeah.
insomnia is, oh, well, you're stressed out, it's anxiety, it's this, it's that. And it's like, dude, I don't think so. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we have an innate sense to us. And so to your point, being your own advocate,
Yeah.
being curious and open-minded. I do think the more we talk about this, from a woo perspective, it I think impacts the morphic field. Are you familiar with morphic resonance?
Yeah.
The idea of the 100th monkey at the typewriter figures it out, and then that cascades across the species, kind of a thing. So if one of us can up level or move through a membrane and talk about it like a contagion in a good way, we can, up level a little bit as a collective. That's the hope. I try not get into that like I'm here to help humanity thing, because it's bad enough that I wear like white blazers and shit. I don't need to turn into a cult leader on
Oh, you're
accident or
exactly
on
right on that.
purpose. Yeah.
There's so many different examples. That's why I feel like me and Sheila are kind of the chosen ones to open up that gateway. There's a little off
Yeah.
topic, but Bannister ran the mile under 4 minutes, right? What happened after that? Everyone started. Now
Yes.
imagine a squirrel. There's flying squirrels. There had to be this one squirrel that jumped, and the whole
Yeah.
population of squirrels like, I didn't know we could do that. So
Yeah.
once we penetrate that, I feel like the Neo in the Matrix. Once we reveal the truth to the masses, then it's over. That's what they're trying to
I know
suppress.
Kung Fu. Yeah. And I'll connect you guys when my husband, if he gets through the screening process for this sleep study. It's 3 days at the university here. And because he has much more intense like night terrors and sleep paralysis than I do. And he was a sleepwalker who in New York City would walk around the W Hotel and wake up in his, pajamas down in the boiler room of the hotel. How the hell do you just casually get down there? Right. So I'll keep you posted, but we should stay in touch because, my world's kind of the purposeful waking dream, the shamanic journeying meditation. And, we might reach a point where there's a temporal pincer here and they connect on the other side and loop this whole topic and give it a container. And I just appreciate the chance for being able to talk about it. And yeah, get Jacques Vallée's book, Confrontations. There's so much good stuff on this subject that's coming out of fields that are not necessarily spiritual or even, straightforward science. But, I'm hopeful that we get some answers this year. I do think the world's about to get very weird.
Very
And
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're running out of time now, Rachel, but if anyone wants to contact you, how
Yeah.
can they reach you?
I would recommend go to my Substack. I have a website, totemreadings.com, but the Substack, which is called Totem Readings, has a lot of content around these topics from sort of a shamanic perspective. So if you're curious at all, most of the full moon deep dives get into quote, especially in the last year or so, dreams in quotes that are not dreams. And you should see the comments under these posts. That's where, to me, it gets the most interesting is people going, I had that exact experience that same night. You know, so to your point about the conversation sort of elevating consciousness as a byproduct, I think the totem reading Substack is the place to visit. And you know, I'm going to be writing about this upcoming Aquarius full moon. I'm writing about the blue ceiling with the gods on it and some of this other stuff. And that post is going to be called Ancient Futures. It'll be out sometime early August. And I think, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we're going to start seeing in our waking reality and modernity more of what the ancients used to talk about.
Wonderful. I love that.
Wow.
And that's a good point to end on. Do you have any final words, Cyrus?
Just we've talked to so many people. You're definitely the most introspective, the deepest, educated that I've
I don't
talked
know about
to
that, but thank you.
so far. Yeah, so please keep doing what you're doing and keep us in the loop. And I'm sure we're
Yeah,
going to break some ground here within these next couple of years in the strange world we're living in, for sure.
I agree. Yeah,
So much.
thank you.
Thank you again, Rachel. Bye.
Thank you.